What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Collector's Outpost. I am John, and I'm here with Anakin Starkiller from At Star's End, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff that we have here that he's recently designed. I've actually just reviewed the newer TXQ Ahsoka series lightsabers, and I actually reviewed these two. They're both designed by him. One was made of metal and has the installs. I don't remember if this is... No, there's SNV4s, and these were made of resin, and he also designed the Ezra 3 that we also took a look at. And I actually want to talk to you about one thing on this, too.
Sounds good.
All right. So where did these come from? I know you were designing these, so where did you get the stuff to design them from the show? Because I didn't see any of these details until I actually watched the behind-the-scenes Blu-ray, or 4K, I should say. And then I noticed some little details just between these and that, and then even this, which is one little detail that I pointed out to a lot of people, which I'm not even sure you even knew about this little section here.
The green tape.
It was green. See, so you caught that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they made theirs black, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. In case anybody hasn't seen the last one, he was actually here for a Real Parts Kenobi video, which, by the way, is awesome. He brought all his real parts stuff. Great video. I'll put that down below in the description if you want to check it out. Tell them a little bit about you, your really quick, your history, how long you've been working on lightsabers, designing and stuff like that.
Okay, I found the Replica Prop Forum, which was, the birthplace of any type of fan-made, non-Lucasfilm produced lightsaber replicas, starting all the way back in 1999. So we're talking 26 years ago at this point. Back then, it was an AOL posting board, and then it became an easy board where people would sort of talk about the different projects that they have. And then as the community would become interested in particular props, whether it be like a Han Solo and Carbonite or a Darth Vader helmet or a lightsaber, what we would do sometimes is pool resources, right? And say, because the original props for the first movies were found parts. So the community started with people saying, like, what were the props made out of and how can I find them, right? So you had a bunch of fans going to camera stores or Army and Navy stores or, or Sync ripping off Home Depot, right?
The Sync story in the last video was awesome. Check that out.
In order to put them together. But then as we tracked down what some of these parts were and found that they were incredibly rare, like a World War I rifle grenade, people said, like, we can't all go out and get them because they're not just garbage, right? They're 100-year-old collector's items in and of themselves. And so people started doing small runs with machine shops to replicate these parts. So I think I first did like a static Luke saber in something like 2007. That's probably about right. And then did a static Obi-Wan. And then right before COVID, I did a Luke V2 that was installable. And so I noticed there were other companies out there like TXQ. And so I got in contact with them and said, like, I'm designing these hilts over here. Why don't we put our heads together on some of these things, and I can send you designs, and then you can have the electronics expertise, which you have, which I do not have, and start producing things that are more accurate than what you're selling right now.
Right.
And so the first collaboration was the Book of Boba Fett Luke lightsaber.
Yes, right.
Then they worked with me on doing a Princess Leia lightsaber. We did an Ezra before the Ahsoka show came out, so it was the Ezra's second lightsaber from Rebels.
Okay. Right.
And then there were a couple ones after that. And then while that was happening, TXQ started sort of developing their own in-house design team and paying more attention to like the particulars of the hilt and upping their game in that way.
And I guess that brings us to where we are today in today's production of stuff like that. So you've got a resin version here, which, by the way, are like one of my favorites. They're super thin. And then when I found out that they were actually pushing out the electronics version, that was awesome. I was really curious on how that was going to happen. So we'll talk about that because these were made of resin. Right, and there's some like metal parts and stuff like that, like D-rings and whatever. But they're super, super thin, just like they were in the show. But I'm assuming that in the show they had obviously the props, but then they had her electronic version, which were probably thicker, like this one, right?
So let's start with.
And where did you get the details
from? So the Ahsoka sabers are kind of funny because, back when we were first replicating stuff from the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy, there was a hero lightsaber, and then there were stunt lightsabers, right?
Yeah, right.
So like, there's one Obi-Wan lightsaber.
There's a very clear one that's
right.
Yes.
And then there might be a second hero, but largely there's one that tracks. There's a Graflex, right, with grips on it that seems to be consistently throughout the movie, right? There's a Hero Vader saber that's an MPP. There are some other stunt props, but like largely there's a single one to go for.
Right.
By the time you get to like the stuff that Disney's making, they just make so many different versions of each prop that it's almost like hard to figure out what's the hero.
Well,
right?
even like in with Anakin's, I think episode 3, they had his hero prop. I believe there was a metal one. There was a foam one, which they were saying like they just figured out the layering of the chrome technology to be able to bend it and stuff like that. Then they had the stunt version with the rod on it, which was almost a completely different looking saber that resembled that. So it's like, I mean, there was like, so when people ask me like, well, what's the accurate version? I'm like, well, accurate version to what version are you exactly talking about?
Right.
Because I could say something's accurate and it might be a millimeter off. To me, that's accurate. That's fine. That's all I care about. But like, you're like, well, I want the one from this show at this scene. I'm like, well, we got to figure out what version that was. Was that the foam one, the rubber one? Was that a metal one? Was like, did that like have electronics? And that's kind of like where we are in these here.
Right. In the 80s, right, the hero was the thing made out of metal.
Right,
and
the
they
metal
made
one.
one of it. And it's for close-ups, right? And then the stunts were made out of resin or foam, and they were meant to be thrown around. And if you had a close-up, you wouldn't shoot that because it would look ugly.
Right.
But by the time we're getting to in the 21st century, it's actually, with the Ahsokas, it's actually the opposite, right? There is no metal hero of Ahsoka's lightsaber in these terms, right? Because the belt hangers aren't metal, right? She, like when Rosario wears them, she doesn't wear metal lightsabers on her belt. One, because they would be bigger and more dangerous, and two, because like the production quality's gotten so high on the stunt stuff that you can do close-ups and it doesn't screw you up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look at those.
Exactly. Like, like this is made out of metal. This is made out of resin. Under a 4K video, they don't drastically look different.
Yeah, especially if you're like on a wide shot and stuff like it's just her. Like she was standing there with Luke in the Book of Boba Fett show.
Right.
Towards the end, she, you just have the belt hangers there. You could. What versions were those? Who knows?
And with digital, and with the digital technology, where every scene's retouched itself, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're like, oh, we can't show that because there's a paint check, you go, no, there's not.
No, there's not anymore.
Right. Exactly. So anything you want to fix, you can fix it in post, right? So when it came to looking at doing a version of Ahsoka's, I had to sort of think like, well, which version do I want to start with? Because I didn't like doing like conglomerations because there's such variance. So it was a long studying process of the hilts. For her appearance in Mando, right? What she has is either a resin or a 3D printed belt hangers. But then the stunt props, right? The ones that light up because they want to do the on-screen, the on-screen lighting capture, they're actually very large 3D printed. They're even larger than this, 3D printed handles, because it was the first time trying to get the technology into these hilts that she would hold. So if you look at the props that she's using in Mandalorian, right, the saber is largely about this size, but the Shoto is huge. It's like almost as big.
And which one, the Mandalorian?
In the Mandalorian, right? And they look to be 3D printed pieces that they assembled around the electronics core with just something to stabilize the blade. There's packing tape just holding the blade in place to make sure it doesn't wobble. But when they came to do the TV show with her, and it wasn't going to be a one-off, and she was going to have a lot more fighting and stunt work to do, they went back, it seems, and like redesigned hilts that would hold the electronics, that you wouldn't have to have wires up your sleeve or anything like that, and that would be much more solid and appear to be fully metal. So these are her belt hangers from Mandalorian and from Ahsoka. These are the fighting sabers from Ahsoka. This reference came from two props that showed up at either a Comic-Con or one of the celebrations. They had these on display. They match. The only thing that's different.
San Diego Comic-Con?
It might have been a San Diego Comic-Con.
I think a lot of hilts were on display there. I think, if I remember right.
So it was one where they had like Ahsoka's sabers, and they had the Yoda saber, and they had the dark saber, like all on a pair, or all in a set.
Right.
And the only real difference between these hilts and the fighting hilts that they showed there is one, they had since they were the fighting hilts, they had this. And then the only difference was that they actually have a threaded emitter where the blade screws in instead of having the set screws.
Love those.
Yeah. So, when I talked with TXQ about possibly doing that, but because the blades that they have set up were not set up for the threaded thing, and because also then you would have to buy the blades specifically from TXQ rather than using the
that's
blade
the
that
thing.
you already have.
I have the screw and blade from Saber Forge, I believe it is. Absolutely love the screw and blades. And then the Ultimate Works Kestis crossguard. The crossguards have threads on it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. It's so easy.
Yeah.
Especially for like the thin neck. So I have the Kenobi Saber Forge with the screw and neck. I mean, like, it's a solid connection. Absolutely love it. I wish more would come like that.
So any differences between the two designs are for that. This is thicker. It is thicker to hold the electronics, but it's based on a prop that's thicker to hold the electronics.
Right.
So it's not like we took the accurate design and made it inaccurate for the TXQ. What we did was we just chose a different version of Rosario's Sabers in order to base the TXQ design upon.
Right. So where did you find the designs? Were you just studying like the video and just some of the photo references that popped up? Or?
There was the video references from the behind the scenes for Mandalorian when they first did the at the end of the season they did that one sort of retrospective that we were hoping was going to include more material on Luke and didn't, right? But they did have some background material on Rosario's Sabers, so that's one of the places we started.
Right.
There were belt hangers that showed up at a con. Again, I don't know whether it was a Celebration or whether it was New York or San Diego Comic-Con. It was one of the big ones in the United States, and it might have been Celebration, one of the other.
Right.
And so that's where I started with these two.
All right, so if you guys are lucky, these resin versions, he has a few left that you guys can check out. I'll put a direct link down below. I think he said, like 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Possibly. So hurry up if you want the resin ones. These are actually the ones I have on display because I think they're perfect. These I have inside. Now, the rusted D-rings here, is that what the show looked like? Or did you guys just do that for the hell of it, for fun of it? Did TXQ just take that on? And I think there was supposed to be 2 versions of this, right? There's supposed to be a clean one?
I don't know what they're doing in terms of production. The rust does come from photos that we have that show that this was added. Whether it is a topical rust like this, where it's paint,
like a paint
or whether it's done with acid, we don't necessarily know. They went with the acid. I actually think it looks fantastic.
I think it looks great.
Yeah.
I was told that there was supposed to be another version of that coming out, like a clean version.
Yeah, it might be. I've talked to James at TSQ about a couple different versions that he's looking to put in production.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is I often just don't know when things are showing up and when things are not from them, because it's often like I just do the design work and I pass it on to them.
Right.
And then it's up to them to do the production side of it.
Right. And so before we move on to the Ezra one, I just want to point out one more thing, that on the resin ones, which I've actually seen in the behind the scenes stuff, these little black sections, these rings are actually weathered in there. So you can see some of the tearing of like the paint, the wear and tear and everything on that, which do not show up on the metal versions. Is that kind of how the prop was, just a bit more clean?
Actually, these ones did have some of the weathering in there. I think the reason why it's not there is just because TXQ produces
in production, right?
In different types of factory that like don't have somebody with a paintbrush, right? They have somebody that does like, this is a specific anodizing color and this is an anodizing color, and this can be done with chemical effects, but it's like baths that things go in rather than somebody sitting there with, with grit or paint or something like that to work on it.
Yeah, it's a production thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
but
that.
if you wanted to add that, what I'm probably going to do with mine is there's a couple topical weathering techniques that they use on the show. There are different types of sprays that give like the grime and the rust. I'm going to probably put a little bit more on mine, and then I'll probably go in here with some silver just to like get a little bit more wear on the grip.
Now, and what about the color variations? Because we know a lot of time, I've seen them now, both silver, and I've also seen them silver and a darker gray.
Yeah, so some people were saying, the EFX version is 2 colors where the Shoto is darker than the
I think the
Saber.
Disney one's 2 colors too, I think, yeah.
And so they've said, well, how come they're not? Therefore, it's inaccurate. Again, it's different props.
Right, because I've seen them both silver too.
Yeah, the ones that were on display that we started with were both silver, so I wanted to stick with that.
Yeah.
Are there other ones where this is a slightly darker version? Yes. Now, one of the questions is like, is that a different paint or is that just more weathering? Because the topical sprays that they use to get like a rust effect or to do a darkening effect, it might just be that they spray it 4 more times with the darkening effect, and then you end up with a slightly different shade.
They're virtually identical, you know, besides the thickness and that little weathering thing. And so absolutely fantastic job on these things. So let's stick with the Ahsoka series here. We have the Ezra 3 lightsaber here that you also worked on.
Yep.
So let's talk about this, where you found these designs, because there was a version that came out before this and it was rather different. Like this whole section was different. It actually had a side button and everything on it. All right, so here's actually the one I'm talking about. As everyone can see, I've reviewed this on the channel, so you can pull this up. It actually has this kind of Luke control box on the side with 2 arrows and everything. I feel like what happened here, these are actually silver versus that kind of brass-ish look. I feel like what happened here, no one knew what the hell this lightsaber looked like.
Yeah, screenshots.
Yeah,
I mean,
everyone was just pulling from the TV show, screenshots, not maybe high res. He's always holding it like this. Then there was the shot we saw of, it was kind of apart. This whole section was off, dealing with the wires and stuff like that. So I feel like when this came out, they just kind of rushed it. They just pushed it out to the public. And then little by little, certain little things started to come out. Like this was completely inaccurate, you know? And then what I was finding that when I got the 4K Blu-ray disc that came out, you got a really good look at this saber finally through the behind the scenes. And what I discovered was that this was completely like a hunter, like a dark green, kind of like a hunter green. And these, even that one came out black too. And this came out black. But when you look at it in the show, because of color correcting, I actually did a little video on that. I uncolor corrected the video, brought some of the saturation up, and it was totally green.
Okay.
You know, and then when you pull up the behind the scenes footage, I mean, it's blatantly green. It's fully green.
You know,
what I mean?
once you see it, it makes sense because it's supposed to be a descendant of
Because that green
Kanan.
kind of passed down.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Kanan's grip,
then his staple gun was green. Then the next one, the top was technically green. You know, in Rebels. You know, and then it made sense. You know, when you saw it, I'm like, oh, of course. Why would it not be green?
Right. So it started, of course, with screen caps. Right. We saw the show. It's the first time you got to see a lightsaber being constructed on camera, which is exciting.
Which was incredible.
Right. So that was something that I wanted to have as part of the design. I originally came up with a way that the top would come off and put back on in the way that it does in the show.
Like a twist off?
Yeah, like a twist off where you could just do it. But then when TXQ wanted to produce it, I decided to get rid of that feature because TXQ does light up lightsabers that people like want to be able to swing around a battle with, right? Not just sort of display pieces. And what we were gaining in the ability to take that off and put it back on and sort of reenact that scene,
worth it.
we were losing in terms of stability. Like I didn't want these things rattling around in people's hands or breaking as they're trying to play with it.
Proppy kind of thing.
Exactly. So I decided to just sort of make this all one piece. So we had the references from screen grabs. Then a couple months later, there were some behind the scenes photos that showed up. There were images that you saw of the actor with it in his hand from promotional material. So I was able to get some details about like how the emitter was constructed and like different sizes and stuff like that from it. And then I created a design. I sent it to TXQ. A couple months went by. It didn't seem like they were going to do it. And then all of a sudden they sent me a message saying, we are going to go through with it. So we want to use your design. I made as many changes as I could using the best references I had at the time. And then they made a couple changes based on, what they found there, to be in line with their design
production
and
type
the way
of thing,
they so things like this extra set screwed hole, which is there to hold the chassis, that was not there on my original design.
Sure. Which I guess in production you can expect little things.
Yeah. That same thing happened with the Book of Boba Fett saber when we first did that. They did that in order to hold it in and then changed a little bit later. These set screws here are different than the original. The original on the Hero doesn't have any set screws, and on the Fighting Saber they're actually hidden all the way back down here.
Oh, okay.
But they moved them on TXQ so that you could have more blade stabilization, right? If you put them down here and there's your plug, there's not much to grab on. Whereas if you move it up here, it's a more stable saber. In the newest images too, we saw that these little black parts have,
the little
have a
fins.
little extra detail.
Yeah.
And then these screws were not on my original design. TXQ put them on. Originally, I had it where like it would screw in here, and then the whole thing would screw together to hide those.
Right, because
set
those
screws.
aren't actually on the. I'm assuming like the prop itself is maybe is glued on, or.
I mean, probably
Because I don't see any screws on this on the actual prop.
I mean, there are also, again, a number of different versions.
Right.
Because there's one version of this where this part seems to go up higher. It goes like all the way up here. But then there's other versions where it is in the correct position. So I feel fine about that. And then when they put it in production, one of the interesting things that they did was they used stainless steel for the emitter and for the guard.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's what this thing's a skullcracker. I mean, if you're going to defend your family with a lightsaber, this is the one to do it, because the stainless steel crossguard is tough as nails. And gives it like a real sizable weight and power.
I mean, this is a beautiful one. And what's really cool about this version of Ezra's, I mean, he really, well, not Ezra himself, but the crew that designed it, they really pulled from Kanan, which I really liked.
Yep.
Which it was such a cool emitter there, but they kind of teched it up, I guess, modernized the look with these with the rings and stuff like that. It's such a cool lightsaber.
I have about 12 of these in the shop right now. I had been considering doing replacement plates here and replacement side guards to bring all that in line. I might still, if they don't sell as is, it's possible that at a certain point I'm going to make some modifications and sell a small run of 10 modified versions that go more towards my original design. But I also have so many projects in the works right now that I don't want to start taking things apart.
I hear you. And did you bring some of those other projects with you?
I did.
All right, so we will move on to part 2. Thank you all for checking out this video, and there will be a part 2 with some more lightsabers to talk about with Anakin Starkiller at Star's End. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you all in the next video.